today's Top Boxing News.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of her big win this past weekend, Ellie Scotney versus Mayerlin Rivas. Unification eyed by Eddie Hearn. We know that both Ellie and Mayerlin were in action this past weekend. Ellie saw herself become a champion this past weekend, whereas Mayerlin, she remained one in defense of her WBA title opposite the ring Argentina's own Nazarena Romero.
Talked about that in my previous video. As far as Ellie,
I thought it was a brilliant performance from Scotney. Eddie Hearn said, "We don't have to worry about a rematch, so we are looking at unification straight away. There are 3 other champions at super bantamweight, which is one of the most wide-open divisions in the women's game right now. The WBC belt has been held by Yemi Mercado for 4 years and 6 defenses, while 17-0 French woman Sigeline Lafarve won the WBO title back in April. But it is the WBA belt that Hearn believes Scotney will get a crack at next as the current holder."
Mayerlin Rivas is tied to Matchroom. Even if her last fight wasn't a Matchroom show, she is a Matchroom fighter.
A fortunate one to be a champion here and now, as it looked a lot to me like Nazarena Romero was well on her way to lifting the WBA title from the long-reigning champion.
But the fight was stopped in the 5th round due to a clash of heads and ruled a draw by the 3 judges scoring the fight. I myself think Nazarena should have got the decision.
A few hours after Scotney won her belt in London, Rivas held on to her title via a technical draw with Nazarena Romero, who was badly cut by an accidental clash of heads in the 5th round of their encounter in Buenos Aires. Depending on how long Romero takes to heal, they may run it back, but Hearn stated that he is hoping to make the unification between Rivas and Scotney. He said, "We are still working out exactly what our next steps are with Scotney, but Rivas is with us, and she is an exceptional fighter. That would be a great fight between the 2 of them, and it should be a straightforward one to make."
It's an in-house fight.
Mayerlin Rivas, God bless her, she's not the kind of fighter that you have to break the bank to get her in the ring. It would literally be the biggest fight of Mayerlin Rivas' career so far on the biggest stage, on the biggest platform. She has fought once, just once, under the Matchroom banner in defense of her WBA title opposite the ring Munoz.
A year ago.
A year later, she's very fortunate to still be a champion, and even if she can sidestep Nazarena Romero temporarily, at some point, somebody's going to have to deal with her.
That if the cut on Nazarena Romero's left eye takes a bit of time to heal, allowing enough time for Mayerlin to have another fight with another fighter, another champion,
it's really only a temporary fix. As soon as Nazarena Romero is fully healed and able to compete, somebody's going to have to deal with her, presumably the winner of a proposed Scotney versus Mayerlin Rivas fight. Now, what can we expect that fight to look like? Well, Mayerlin Rivas would be the veteran.
Far more experience than Ellie Scotney, more rounds in the bank.
Don't actually think Mayerlin Rivas has the same ceiling that young Ellie Scotney has.
Crawford.
She is more experienced, and she is the more long and limber fighter of the 2. Mayerlin Rivas is quite statuesque for 122 pounds, super bantamweight, those long levers.
She'll likely have height and reach over Ellie Scotney, but not speed and sharpness.
Quickness. Ellie Scotney is several years younger than Mayerlin Rivas and a lot fresher. Punches are a lot shorter.
More defensible.
Because they're shorter, they're harder to counter. Ellie Scotney, she's a very accurate puncher, but not a strong puncher, at least not as strong as Mayerlin Rivas. I think overall punching power would have to go to Mayerlin, with speed, quickness, and accuracy going to Ellie Scotney.
Trial for Ellie is getting mid-range to inside on Mayerlin because she's a somewhat smaller fighter than Mayerlin. She can't fight the fight from the outside. She's got to get mid-range to inside.
Cutting angles and minding Mayerlin Rivas' long levers and her punching power.
Crawford.
I like the body attack from Ellie Scotney, who regularly mixes in body shots with her combinations, getting those shots under the elbow, just around the guard or under it.
Crawford.
Saw that in the Mary Romero fight, and we saw that this past weekend in the Shernika Johnson fight. Those first 2 rounds, you saw Ellie Scotney stringing punches together and finishing off those combinations with shots to the body.
Ellie would have to try to find a way to take it to Mayerlin Rivas, crowd her, do the business, and mind her power.
Because Mayerlin Rivas is the taller and stronger fighter of the 2, the bigger puncher, I feel like Mayerlin would take chances with Ellie that she didn't want to take this past weekend with Nazarena. Nazarena proved to be the bigger puncher of the 2, but Ellie, God bless her, she's not that big on power.
So she may not get the same respect from Mayerlin that Nazarena got from Mayerlin.
Mayerlin might feel a little bit more froggy with Ellie than she did with Nazarena. Nazarena really is one of the bigger punchers punchers, if not the biggest puncher at or around this weight. Ellie Scotney's got to finesse her way to a decision. I don't think there's much chance of Ellie knocking out Mayerline Rivas. She's not a knockout merchant.
But she's skilled and she's fast.
Punches are compact. I still feel like Ellie can fluster Mayerline Rivas mid-range to inside with her speed and combinations, the variety of punches that she throws, and when she throws them.
Because both fighters saw action the same weekend, they're basically on the same schedule. So I'd put a Scotney versus Rivas fight sometime at or around the end of August or maybe September.
Slight edge to Ellie Scotney, whose calling card seems to be regularly taking on fighters that are more experienced than she is, with more rounds in the bank than she has, and beating them, making it look easy.
Catford.
It's a tough fight, but I think she can win it. Look for Scotney versus Rivas later on this year, provided everything goes to plan. Men's welterweight news. Errol Spence Jr., ahead of the long-awaited, long-anticipated Terence Crawford fight, says the negotiations were grueling. Tough obstacles due to Terence's demands.
Terence, who was criticized heavily by the Errol Spence Jr. faction of fans last year.
But it seems that time has proven him a shrewd businessman as a result of the negotiations this year. Last year, neither guy was going to get a guarantee. This year,
They both are.
Errol Spence opened up about the sense of relief he has now that his super fight with Terence Crawford crossed the contractual finish line. It feels great for the fight to finally happen. It's been a grueling negotiation. We finally got it done, Spence told a group of reporters. I had to sit out over a year. People have been wanting this fight to happen 5-6 years. It's finally happening.
If it took that long, it's because you were insistent that he has to leave Top Rank, that it has to be on your side of the street.
Those were Errol Spence Jr.'s own words. In any event, he continued, it's finally happening. It feels just great to get through these tough obstacles and all of the demands he wanted.
Spence's fans tried to make Terence Crawford seem unreasonable. But was he?
I'm A-side. Like I said, Terry Crawford got to come across the street. He got to leave ESPN and come to Showtime with Fox.
And now y'all want to say, oh, I ain't fought nobody, but I got a belt now, so
Okay.
Okay.
Sean Porter got a belt too.
So now
Sean Porter got a belt too.
Can we get both of them in the ring?
He said, I'm fighting Mikey. Then I might fight Sean Porter, Keith Thurman.
So he didn't
Pacquiao.
mention Terrence, huh?
He didn't.
That's why the fight took 5 years to make. In a nutshell, that's why.
Do you need a more concise explanation?
Now, Errol Spence Jr. is eager to work off what eventually will be a 16-month break from the ring when he fights Terence Crawford. I'm in the process of getting ready right now. It's been a great training camp so far, said Spence. I am in awesome shape physically and mentally. I'm ready to go and ready to put on a great show.
Ideally, this fight would have happened before Errol Spence Jr.'s car accident, before the intermittent stints of inactivity.
The amount of time that he sat out after the car accident, which was approximately a year,
The year that he missed as a result of the detached retina.
which saw him withdraw from what was supposed to be the Manny Pacquiao fight.
In 2021, he returned to action last year. In 2022, unified titles with Yordenis Ugas, but then he ended up sitting out another year. Well over a year, actually.
16 months. That's the same amount of time that Josh Taylor sat out in between what was the Jack Catterall fight and this past weekend's Teofimo Lopez fight. So you'll excuse me for saying so that it's been less than ideal. And ideally, he would have took on Terence before the car accident, before all of that got started.
Spence is now saying that the Crawford fight is the biggest fight in the last 20 years. Mayweather versus Pacquiao, they were old. We are in our prime.
Both guys are in their mid-30s. Are you sure about that?
Commercially, this fight is nowhere near as big as Mayweather versus Pacquiao.
That fight drew in 4.6 million pay-per-view buys, whereas this fight, in today's unstable pay-per-view market,
They'd be lucky to bring in 1 million.
to kick off the promotion of their undisputed welterweight matchup, Errol Spence Jr. said his clash with Terence Crawford was the most significant welterweight bout in the last 40 years, and 10 years overall. Spence is now doubling down on the storyline, saying his July 29th super fight against Crawford is the most significant matchup of the millennium. This is a legacy fight for me. This is Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns. De La Hoya versus Felix Trinidad, Spence told a group of reporters.
It's funny he should mention those fights and those fighters who were a lot younger then than Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford are now.
Where Errol and Terence are coming up on their mid-30s, Ray Leonard was only 25 years old when he fought Tommy Hearns the first time. Tommy Tommy was only 22.
They were young.
Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad, I think they were both 26 when they met, when they fought.
Those fighters were, in fact, in their prime, whereas there are serious questions hanging over the head of Errol Spence Jr. Errol, in particular, due to all of the intermittent stints of inactivity we've seen from him in the last 3 years.
Terrence may be the somewhat older fighter, older by about 2 years, I believe it is.
Yeah.
But he's been the more active fighter in the last 2 years, 2 or 3, averaging at least 1 fight a year in the last 3 years.
Errol, on the other hand, he's only fought 2 times in the last 3.
None in the last one, the night of the fight that will cap off a 16-month stint of inactivity, a year and some months. This is a legacy fight. 2 undefeated fighters fighting for the undisputed champion.
Undisputed championship.
At 147 pounds, this is probably the biggest fight of the last 10 or 20 years. Everyone says that Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao fight was huge, but they were a lot older. We're in our prime. This is going to be an amazing fight. Everybody knows he has knockout power, and I have knockout power, so we're going to put on an amazing show and an amazing performance.
Big fights, the fights that are big fights, are measured in the interest and revenue that they generate.
I think this is, in fact, the biggest fight that the welterweight division will have seen in some time, but I don't think it's anywhere near as big as Mayweather versus Pacquiao. It's not even close. That's the biggest box office fight in the history of box office fights.
You can't compare this to that in terms of scale and size, as neither Errol or Terrence have the following that Manny Pacquiao had or Floyd Mayweather at that time. So in terms of big fights, yeah, maybe it's big by today's standards.
But how big is it really? Is it going to do at the box office what Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis just did at the box office? In excess of 1 million pay-per-view buys. I certainly hope so. It would be an encouraging omen if this fight brought in at least 1 million buys to show that when you make the fights that fans want,
the fans show up.
But I don't know with any certainty that this fight will bring in excess of 1 million pay-per-view buys like Ryan and Gervonta did, because neither fighter, neither Errol or Terrence, has the following that Ryan and Gervonta have.
Ryan, especially on social media, he's got his hands on the pulse of the youth.
And that's useful. That can go a long way in helping to sell a fight. So, I mean, I hope that this can be commercially successful.
I'm gonna buy it.
But the biggest fight of the millennium, I do think that's hyperbole. I do think that's a stretch.
We'll see how big it is.
Or how big it ain't. For Crawford, it represents the opportunity, the unique opportunity in the 4-belt era to see himself become a 2-time, 2-weight undisputed champion. He said as much.
Yeah.
He emphasized.
He'll be undisputed at 2 weights, to which Derek James tried to correct him, insisting that Teofimo Lopez just did that this past weekend.
Further facilitating that delusion, Teofimo Lopez was not an undisputed champion at lightweight. He's not an undisputed champion now at super lightweight. There are literally 3 other champions at that weight that he hasn't fought.
Irrespective of how you think a fight between them would go until he actually fights them and beats them, he's not a bona fide undisputed champion.
He never was, and it's bizarre how in this day and age, when you point out the facts as they are, the facts and the stats, people get offended.
They get angry.
They accuse you of quote-unquote hating, when it seems to me that the only ones hating are you guys. You hate the truth.
Yeah.
You hate reality, and anyone who speaks it.
Errol Spence Jr. himself seems to have very big plans beyond this fight if he wins. He definitely wants a Canelo Alvarez fight at either 165 or 168, which he says is his natural weight.
Further accenting what I already thought, that beyond this fight, neither guy is likely to stay at welterweight, that if presented with the opportunity, the 33-year-old career-long welterweight Errol Spence would climb close to the super middleweight mark and welcome a fight with Canelo Alvarez. We're not thinking about Canelo right now. If the fight comes across the table, I will definitely take that fight. I feel like 165 to 168, that's more my natural weight and a lot easier for me to make. So I definitely will take the fight.
Canelo Alvarez is tabbed to face either middleweight champion Jermall Charlo at super middleweight or move up in weight to cruiserweight way up there to cruiserweight to challenge Badu Jack.
For his WBC title, those things in mind, I'm not sure that a Canelo versus Spence fight is realistic, depending in which direction Canelo Alvarez goes in. Spence has previously promised an all-out war if a fight ever took place against Alvarez, while Alvarez has consistently brushed off the notion, saying that the dream fight is not his priority due to his ongoing and always evolving career goals. Alvarez's lifelong confidant, Eddie Reynoso, has previously stated that the fight is fathomable after the Crawford chapter of his career closes. Spence will move up to super welterweight.
So he won't be around for Boots, and he won't be around for Virgil Ortiz.
This is the last belt I have to get before I finally move up. If he doesn't initiate the rematch clause, then I am moving up to 154 pounds.
Now, as far as Canelo,
who Errol Spence Jr. means to share the ring with beyond this fight, Canelo has Terence Crawford winning the fight. He's picked Crawford to beat Errol Spence. I have as well. Those of you out there may feel differently, and that's okay. That's all right. That's what makes it a good fight. You've got the Spence fans rooting for Spence and picking him, rooting him on, and you've got the Crawford fans doing the same thing. I think Errol Spence Jr.'s best chance in this fight is to get off to a fast start. It usually takes Terence Crawford approximately 2 to 3 rounds to get into a groove, get his range down, and establish his jab.
Spence has got to start early. He's got to step into his punches and let his hands go.
Terence isn't known for doing a whole lot in the first 2 to 3 rounds of a fight, though the caveat is, having not fought in approximately 16 months the night of the fight, getting off to a fast start.
That could drain Errol's battery.
I know what you're telling yourself. You're telling yourself that when have you ever seen Errol Spence Jr. get tired in a fight?
There's a first time for everything. When's the last time this guy sat out for 16 months?
That's a longer layoff than the layoff in between the Porter fight and the Danny Garcia fight, and that's a longer layoff than the Danny Garcia fight over to the Ugas fight.
Spend that much time away from the ring.
Having not made the weight in some time, conditioning issues could develop, could manifest.
To some degree, however big or small, and don't forget that Terence Crawford...
You saw what he did to Sean Porter's work rate. Sean Porter did not land anywhere near as many punches on Terence Crawford as what he landed on Errol Spence Jr. because Terence was making him miss and making him pay, keeping him on the move and not allowing him to set his feet.
He'll do that to Errol.
Missing punches cost twice as much energy as landing.
It's just something to think about.